All right, thanks guys for being on with me tonight. This is week 2 of our book, Get Over Your Damn Self. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm loving this book. I told somebody earlier, I can't believe that I had it sitting on my shelf all these months and I kept reading other books before I read this one. I should have read this months ago. It's so good. So if you're just joining us, if you don't have your book, poor Tamsin doesn't have her book yet, that's okay. Still hang out with us, still chat. You guys know that these are super informal. I have people muted just for background noise, but you can always unmute yourself or chat me in the chat. Last week, I just wanted to kind of recap because some people weren't on last week and some people may not have read yet. So last week, she talked about your master list. So you guys should have been working on that this week. Not only just the list you work off of every day, whether it's written, but to keep your master list somewhere where you just dump all of your names. And I've started working on that. I'm doing mine in Word. I'm using a table just because I like that you can type more in one of the boxes. I'm just not that great at Excel when it comes to text. The other thing she talked about, and we talked about this last week, and some of you guys shared on the call, is your why. So if you haven't revisited your why, go do that and make it selfish. Remember, she talked about it's great if you want to pay for family vacations, but that's not enough to keep you going in this business. You really want to find your why and make it selfish. It can start with family vacations, but maybe it's just because mama wants to pay for one herself or mama wants her own vacation or something to make it selfish. And then she just went over kind of why people fail, and those were just reflective questions like, are you coachable? Are you ready to get uncomfortable? And those types of things. So definitely go back and check those out in 1 through 3 if you haven't. Tonight is chapters 4, 5, and 6. I think we'll get through them. Chapter 5 was pretty long, so if we don't, I'm not going to try to cram it in. We can always do it next week. Because the way the book splits up, we have 3 chapters a week, except the last week it works out to be only 2. So if you have to move one, that's okay. Tonight, though, I love it. She talks about what is your story. And I'm going to pull my notes up. I have some of my notes here. So what's your story? And you guys have probably heard this a lot, the saying that facts tell, but stories sell. And it's really true. But you really don't understand that until you understand that human beings actually, we are emotional beings. And she talks a little bit in there about the research that we're actually not rational. We rationalize. We make decisions based on emotions. And a lot of times even we'll make a decision and then rationalize why that was a good decision after we'd made it. So she said you can have all the facts in the world, but people are making their decisions based on how you're making them feel, how that decision makes them feel emotionally, okay? And so that's something to keep in mind. I know a lot of times, especially when you're new, and she even says in the book that she's done it before too, you puke plexus or you want to give them all the facts because you think that's what they want. I mean, that's okay. We've all been there. But in this chapter, she talks about you actually have to talk about yourself before you ever talk about the company or the products. And I really like that. It put a different spin on it because it takes the pressure off, I think. Takes the pressure off of you, and it helps you to stop puking plexus on people if you realize I don't even have to talk about the products at all, right? I don't even really have to talk about any of the details in the beginning. That'll keep you from puking plexus on it. Now, the story that you're going to come up with is going to be your story. And if you've been doing this with me for a while, we've done some kind of plexus elevator speeches before where we've all worked on like, what's your 30-second plexus elevator speech. This is similar to that, but you're going to make it more about your personal story, and you're going to make it, that someone can really connect to. But even though it's going to be emotional, right, it still has to be fact. So you can't oversell your story. And I'm glad she pointed this out because I think sometimes, not on purpose, we might oversell plexus. We might oversell how amazing someone's going to feel because we feel great in month 8, right? Or we might oversell the weight loss because we've been on it a year and we've lost 4 pant sizes. When really, we didn't lose anything the first month, okay? So your story should be fact-based. So you don't want to oversell anything. You don't want to oversell your paychecks, but you want to wrap it in emotion. And she lays it out really, really simply. And so this is really going to be your assignment for, sometime this week. I want you to come up with your story. Okay. And if you look in her chapter, for those of you who don't have the book yet, she actually lays it out really, really, really well. She has 4 parts to your story, and you're just going to answer these really quickly with a couple of sentences first. That's the first step. So who you are and where you've been, what's happening in your life or what happened in your life to cause you to look for something more, how you heard about your company and why you wanted to be a part of it, and then what it's doing for you and what it's going to do for you. Now, your story, though, guys, you don't want to my dog is sorry, I can't even see the dogs. I have my notes up. Oh, I gave him sticks to chew on. The other one inhaled it and she's barking. So your story, though, guys, it's not your why. So don't confuse it with your why, okay? It might have a little piece of your why, but you're not sharing your why, all right? You guys, I'm going to share my story with you. I'm going to share you the one that she gives in the book, but you have to write this out. You have to practice it. You have to keep it under a minute. So you actually have to time it. I practice mine out loud all of the time. I've always practiced things out. Like if I'm going to get on a phone call with the potential, I talk to myself all the time and practice what I'm going to say. If somebody has made me mad and I'm going to confront them later, like I even did this, when I was a kid, I would just practice out loud what I was going to say. I mainly do it in the shower. That's just where I get my best thinking. Sometimes I'll do it when I'm getting ready because I've had Adelaide ask me before who I'm talking to, okay? So practice this out loud. Answer the 4 questions, but you have to remove the fluff too, right? You want to keep it short and simple and to the point, okay? So I'm going to give you her example of her story, all right? You guys have the book. It's on page 58. She answers, again, just those 4 questions, but she puts it together in a paragraph. So, I've been tied to the billable hour and at the beck and call of my clients my entire career, first as a lawyer and then as a PR exec. But as a mom of 2 little ones, I want more flexibility. I want to own my own schedule, and I want to make more money to get my family further ahead. It's a tall order for a working mom, but I found a way to have it. My PR client introduced me to Plexus. She was funding the business. She hired me to promote through her side gig with my company. I immediately recognized this as a way to build my exit strategy from corporate America. I'm excited to grow a team and a customer base around my current job, the kids, and all the other things I have on my plate to create the lifestyle I really want, and I'm excited to help others have more options too. Now, that sounds really boring when I'm reading it, but this is what she's saying to people out loud. So it's definitely going to flow a little bit better. She may not say it word for word, but you can see that she's drawn them in. She's connected with them, with people who may want more, people who may be in corporate America, and people who may want to make a little bit more money. So let me share I went through the exercise, and this is kind of my quick one. So you guys may have heard me say it before. I worked in corporate America for 15 years, and I was tired of commuting and spending so much time in someone else's office. As Adelaide got older, I wanted to be able to spend more time with her, but I really still wanted to make a lot of money, and I wanted to be able to travel. Our family lives out of state, and I wanted to be able to travel and see them whenever I wanted, not on somebody else's schedule. So most people think you can't be a successful working mom and a stay-at-home mom, but I actually found a way to do both. I found Plexus by accident from a stranger on the internet, but once I heard about the opportunity, what it had done for her family, and saw her paycheck, I knew that this is what I've been looking for to get out of that commute. And after just a month, I was able to earn back my $34.95, have several customers who started really feeling good, and I paid my mortgage. I've been able to create that lifestyle that I want, and I love helping others do the same. So that's my quick. Now, obviously, I'm talking to somebody. That's going to be, like 45 seconds. When you have to type it out, there's certain things in there I probably wouldn't say when I'm talking, but you want to work on developing your story. What is your story? Start thinking about it. Answer those questions, put it together, but there are some things you actually want to leave out of your story when you first talk to people. And I like this too, because again, I think this takes the pressure off of us. So many times we're worried about what do we say? or you're worried you're going to puke plexus. So I think when you have this story to fall back on, and all you're doing, guys, with your story is getting somebody emotionally invested to where they want to ask more questions. You want them to be a little excited and see that it's something that they might want, and you don't even have to give them a whole lot of detail. You're just connecting it so they can see that you love it and it's worked for you or it's working for you. So then you can take it to the next conversation, right? The goal of all of this when you talk to people is to just keep talking in conversational mode, a back and forth, and keep setting up other follow-ups, other phone calls, other appointments. So then you don't have to give them all the information up front. You're going to engage them, and then you're going to follow up and give them a little bit more information. And then you're going to give them a little bit more information, right? So what you don't want to include in your story, things that aren't essential. Okay, so if you have 100 words, right, and you can tell the same story in 50 words, you need to cut it. So I didn't say anything in there about being a tired mama, a breastfeeding mama, having a baby at home. I didn't say any of that. That's part of my story, but I could tell the same thing without putting those details in there, right? The other thing, and I love that she points this out, you never want to suggest behavior that you don't want them to do. And I've seen this a lot when people send me screenshots sometimes of conversations they've had and they can't figure out why the person won't order Plexus or why the person won't get off the fence. It's because with not even realizing it, you have suggested something to them that you don't want them to do. And she gave a couple of examples of this. One, you don't want to say something like, you know, after I researched the products for 3 months, I knew this was the company I wanted to be with. Or you don't even want to say, you know, after being a customer for a year, I finally decided to give the business a try, right? Because those are not things. You don't want your person to research the product for 3 months. You don't want them to be a customer for a year. You want them to join your team as a business partner. So she also, though, gives examples, because we're not saying lie, right? We're just saying leave that part out of your story, because subliminally you are giving them that idea. So you don't want to give them anything that you don't want them to do. She gives some examples, though, of how you can kind of reword that. She says one of them, like if you were a customer for a long time and you actually did fall in love with the products first before you decided to share, which is most of us, right? She said you could just say something like, I love the idea of being able to be the healthiest I've ever been and getting paid for it, right? That's all you have to say. You don't have to say that, you know, it's superfluous to your story that you were a customer or that you waited before you wanted to sell. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to subliminally suggest behavior that you don't want them to do, okay? The other thing you do not want to include, you don't want to include product testimonies. I think this is great. I've never really thought of it this way, because I almost always share my thyroid story or mention it. I don't think it's bad, but I love that all you're doing with this story is getting people excited and relating on you. And you don't have to worry about sharing a product testimony. She actually says that if you lead with your product story or your health testimony, it will suggest to them, without you realizing it, that they need to have their own story before they're ready to share. And that could be true, because we have a lot of people that are like, yeah, I'm not going to share until I know if it works for me, right? So I love it. I've never thought of it this way before. So lead with why you love Plexus without talking about, this huge product testimony. And then the other thing she talks about that you don't want to include, you don't want to end your story without talking about a quantifiable. And for her, in her book, you may not agree with it or not, but she says that's money. Because she says the bottom line, you may have people that love the friendships, the relationships, the trips, the gifts, the sense of community. But bottom line, when people are looking to pay $34.95 and join your business, people want to know if it's going to work and if they're going to get a paycheck, right? So don't undersell yourself. If you have made $25 with Plexus, that's more than the person you are talking to makes with Plexus. So even though technically we can't post our paychecks, you could say something like, and in my first month, I got my, welcome pack back. I got the $99 back that I paid for my welcome pack, or I got my $34.95 back, or whatever it is. She says to always talk about that quantifiable when you're sharing your story. And of course, your story is going to evolve. So she recommends you should actually, and this is kind of the same with your why, every couple months you should revamp your story, right? So after I got out of my commute, I probably need to revamp my story and maybe not put that in there because I don't have to commute anymore, and talk about what it's doing for me now. So you always want to be evolving your story. She talks, though, about people who do get a slow start, and she gives examples of how to talk about that. And I like it because almost all of us were ambassadors and wholesale ambassadors before we wanted to work the business. So she says, here's a couple of examples. These are on page 65 if you guys want to like highlight them. For the last year, I've loved the discount and home-based tax deductions, but I've treated it like a hobby. I'm surrounded by success stories of what can happen when you treat it like a business, and I am ready to run. I'm looking for people to run with me. Are you one of them? Or when I started, I really got in my own way. I wasn't coachable, and I let fear get the best of me, but I'm surrounded by success stories of what can happen when you're coachable and follow the simple, duplicatable business, and I'm not going to let fear keep me from reaching my goals. I would love for you to partner with me. So it's okay to share that piece if you're putting that spin on it, right? Because maybe that's what your truth is. Because whenever you're sharing your story, you still want to share your truth. You just want to put that spin on it, right? To talk about why you're ready to run now or whatever. And then she goes on to say, you want to adapt your story for your audience, right? And that's like me. If I'm talking to someone who doesn't have kids, I am not going to mention the part about being a stay-at-home mom because they could care less. They're not going to connect to that. It's not going to make them feel anything, okay? If I'm talking to somebody who I know absolutely doesn't want to stay home, I'm not going to put that piece in there. I'm not going to talk about that. So you want to adapt your story for your audience. And then she talks a lot about having your own story library. And this is really, really, really good because your story may not relate to your dream teamer. Maybe you have a dream teamer that is your exact opposite and wants the exact opposite things that you get from Plexus. If you have a story library, that's the best way to show them that this business works for someone like them. And she actually gives a list on page 66 of some stories you should add to your library. And I think this should be one of your actions as you're reading this book. Write that down. And luckily with Plexus, we have a huge library already set up. We have Diamond Docs, right? We have the Diamond documentaries. We have people on our own team. So let's say if she's looking for, here's a few to add to your library. Look for a teacher story, a stay-at-home mom story, a working mom story, a student story, a medical professional story. We have all of those, okay? So find those people's stories, whether they're on your team, whether they're on Pink Rockstars or a sideline, and keep them. Whether you write them down, you keep them somewhere, you know their stories. With Diamond documentaries, what I like to do, sending them a link is great. And I've certainly sent Diamond documentary links to people. But it's better if you know their stories, so then you can just share them. And you don't have to worry about somebody whether or not they're going to watch a video, right? Learn their stories and just retell them yourself. It's just like we do with testimonies, okay? I might not have migraines, but I know several of you have had success on Plexus with your migraines, and I know your story. So when I'm talking to somebody, I can say, hey, my friend Tamsin, she actually was suffering from migraines and she isn't anymore. Same with when you're telling these stories of people who are related, that you want to relate to, and maybe you want to share a success story that they can relate to more that isn't your own. So build your own library and just think of some of those. What I would do, I would go through like your next 5 follow-ups this week. So the next 5 people on your list you want to follow up with, or new people you want to reach out to. And I would see if you can find a story that you think will relate better to them and connect to them. And then that's how you can open up the conversation, okay? Yeah, see, so she uses my story. I know a lot of people use my story, whether it's my commuting story, my breastfeeding story, my thyroid story. It's really good to know people's stories. And that's why I tell people, like, spend time on the team page, spend time in the happy hour, watch people's videos, right? Get to know other people on the team so you can share those success stories. And you know, just one little tip, it's not in the book, but that's when you always want to call someone your friend. You don't want to call them like your upline or your sideline, because that doesn't mean anything to them, right? You just want to be like, my friend Amy, even if you've never met me before, even if even if it's somebody, that you saw there before and after, just always call them your friend, okay? So chapter 5, so that was chapter 4, all about your story. And she actually says, there's no greater tool to overcoming objections than to sharing people's success stories. No matter what objection they have, if you have a quick success story that overcomes it, they can't argue with those factual, emotional stories, right? So she said, the sooner you become, or the quicker you become, and the better you get at crafting these stories, then the better you will get at this whole gig. But chapter 5 is all about talking to people. And this is the one that scares people the most, I think. I am not a phone person, but I realize that's my negative talk, right? Instead of me saying I'm not a phone person, I should actually say I am a phone person. I love talking on the phone, right? Change your words. So she says talking to people is key. And we know in this business you have to talk to people. In this chapter, she's going to talk a lot about talking to people in person. We do a lot on Facebook. We do a lot on social media, which is great. I'm not knocking it. I think you can have great connections with people on social media, but don't underestimate the power of in person, right? Either way, whether you're talking to people in a voice message, okay, or you're talking to people on the phone, or you're talking to people in person, you have to do it. You have to talk to people to work your business and grow your business. So she says if this makes you want to throw up, you either have to figure out why, or you have to put down the book. Because if you're not going to talk to people, then obviously you're not going to be successful. So she talks a little bit in the beginning of kind of figuring out why that makes you want to throw up. And if it's a couple of things, if it's because maybe you just aren't confident in knowing the company or the products, that's easy. You can learn that. If it's because you maybe you're unsure of what to say, maybe just, you don't like being around that many people. So she just says you really need to figure that out, kind of tackle that first. But then, we jump right into talking about the business, talking about your company. And this is where I think a lot of new ambassadors get tripped up because they don't know how to talk to people, or they get paralyzed because they want to be perfect and know everything before they talk to somebody. And it's a vicious cycle, right? Because you can't get better at what you say until you talk to people, but you won't talk to people until you perfect it. But you can't perfect it until you practice it. So it's this vicious cycle, and they get paralyzed and they don't talk to anybody. And she says that in there. She's like, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. When I first started reaching out to people, I sucked. I talked too much. I asked too many questions. I listened too little, and I spewed off too many facts. I even had someone critique me after my first story, where the person said, next time you might want to take a breath and ask a question or two so you know if the person you're talking to is actually there. Talk about brutal. I'd probably go home and cry if I was at an opportunity meeting or something and somebody told me that. But she said, here's the great news. She started out as a party of one. She had no one on her team. She fumbled through talking with people, but she still got people to join her team. She still got customers, right? So you don't have to know it all. Your new ambassadors don't have to know it all. They just have to be willing to try and be willing to talk to people. And it's okay if you fumble. It's okay if you don't ask questions or you ask too many. It's okay. But what I love about it is she has come up with, in her experience, these 14 reach out rules to live by, okay? And you guys have probably heard these over and over and over. You've heard us say it: share, don't sell, don't puke plexus, ask questions, listen, engage in a conversation. So a lot of these might be repetitive, but I love that whenever we read these books, it's the same stuff I hear over and over because I know it works. And I know, okay, I really need to pay attention to that because everyone who's successful in this business is saying this is what I should do. So we're going to go through all 14 rules really quickly. They're in the book, and I'm going to give a couple of examples of each one, okay? So the first one, don't be attached to the outcome of any one conversation. This is what we mean when we say don't be afraid of no. You cannot be personally invested or attached to the outcome. And she says you can't let any one conversation with one person slow you down or distract you from your goals, right? And I like that. It's true. The only difference between somebody who's at a higher rank than you or somebody who recruits more than you is because they've heard no more than you. That's it. So you have to detach yourself from the outcome, okay? Number 2, don't be on the hunt. And I love this. I think she talks about, the convincing too is a separate rule, but I've been there, guys. Sometimes you're just like so hungry for a new customer or a new ambassador to make your goal that you start kind of coming across desperate and you're like on the hunt for a customer or an ambassador or an order or points or a welcome pack or whatever, and you forget why we're actually doing this. You forget that they're people. We forget that we can help them. We forget that we're sharing. So she says, if you think about that, you're going to run the risk of coming off desperate. But if that's your energy, that's what you're going to project. Even if you don't mean to, that's what they're going to pick up. So you should always adopt the mindset, she says, of I have something special to share and I'm looking for people who want what I have to offer. That's it. You're looking for people who want what you have to offer. If they don't want it, you're going to move on and find someone who does. You're not going to beg them. You're not going to, obviously you're going to follow up with them, but you're going to be like moving on to the next one, right? Like the waitress at the coffee shop. You've heard us say that 1,000 times. She asks someone for coffee. They tell her no. She goes to the next table. She eventually comes back to that other table that said no and asks them again, right? But she doesn't go home and cry. She doesn't quit her job. She doesn't get upset. She doesn't throw the coffee pot. She's detached from the outcome of that question, okay? And I love, love, love what she said here. I think you guys should write this down. I'm actually going to put it on my board. In our profession, our job is not to get what we want. It's to help other people get what they want. And wow, what a way of thinking about Plexus and network marketing in general. It actually gives me chills to think about it. The success you're seeking will happen when you help a lot of people get what they want. Whether what they want is a smaller waist, to get off medications, to get rid of migraines, to be able to pay for their kids' soccer club, right? The more you focus on helping others be successful, that's when you will be successful. So I love that. Okay, that's a really, really good one. That was on page 72 if anybody is following along. Our job is not to get what we want. It's to help other people get what they want. Boy, I love that. Rule 3, less is more. I love what she says here. And, I think I'd said last week, if anyone's offended by the language, I'm sorry, but I assume if you were, you wouldn't be on the call, which is totally fine for those who are and are not on the call. But in rule 3, less is more. She says, don't be a prospecting slut. I read that and I started cracking up laughing. She said, it's kind of like dating. When you're having conversations with people, and this goes into don't puke Plexus. So when you have those back and forth with people, treat it like a first date. You don't want to show too much skin right away, right? You don't want to be a slut on their first date. You don't want to share with them everything there is to know about Plexus, everything there is to know about ProBio 5 or the triplex in that first initial conversation. So she says, don't fall into the trap of thinking if you tell your potential everything you know about your business and your products, that she'll be wowed by your knowledge of the subject and be convinced that what you're sharing is the greatest thing since the invention of Spanx. It's actually going to come back and bite you in the butt. You are going to overwhelm that person or bore them to death. And then that's why they go silent, and that's why you get crickets, and that's why they never come off the fence. So no verbal vomit, she says. You want to get them to the next date. If you show them on the skin on the first date, they're not going to ask you for a second date. That was just such a funny way to thinking about it. But I love that, right? You keep it as a back and forth. That's all you're doing is engaging. I told someone the other day who was having trouble kind of thinking of it this way. And I said, well, tell me what you would share with me if there was a brand new restaurant and you thought I would love it and you wanted me to go. She's like, well, I would tell you, Amy, there's a brand new restaurant. I think you'll love it. I want you to try it out. I said, okay. You didn't go into where the chef was educated, what their health rating is, what's on their menu. You didn't read me everything on their menu. You didn't tell me what their wine list is. You didn't tell me what their health code rating is. You didn't tell me where they buy their food. You didn't tell me if it's organic, right? All you have to do is tell them you love something and you think they will love it and a quick why. Then you can slowly tell them those little things, but it's in that back and forth. You want to make it a conversation. Rule number 4 in talking to people, be authentic. We say this all of the time. Be vulnerable, be authentic. And I have certainly fallen into this trap when you're not comfortable with network marketing, maybe because you've never done it before and you've never shared something that you want someone to buy from you on a website. So you start sending scripts or you start sending like copy and paste, or you just forget to talk to somebody like you would talk to anybody. You forget to sound like Amy, or you forget to sound like Sarah, right? So she said, your power comes from being authentically you. People respond to people who are real. You are simply a human being who has something to offer them, right? She said, all the people who are incredibly successful leaders, they're all unique. They're still themselves. You guys watch them on Facebook, right? Jill Renfro, she's authentic. She's not like anybody else. Same with a lot of the other Jules, right? No one is the same. So you want to be you, but you want to be a prepared and confident you. You want to have that bold confidence we talk about. Wherever that is, however that's you, you want to be the bold, confident you, right? Because if you're not you, your network's going to know it and they're going to call BS. They're going to be like, something, that's not you. That doesn't sound like you. And they're just not going to want to be a part of it. Rule number 5. I like this. You can't say the wrong thing to the right person. Meaning, hey, if someone's going to jump on board with you, especially when you're trying to figure out your story and how to talk to people, unbridled enthusiasm is all you need. If you have that unbridled enthusiasm, then the right person is going to join you no matter what. She talks about all those people she talked to when she first joined, where she was clueless and puking her company on them, right? Some of them are still going to join. Some of them still did join. So, but it's because she had that enthusiasm. She was excited, right? Tony Robbins says about being perfect, that if you're trying to wait for the perfect story or the perfect answer, or wait till you know everything about the product, he said perfection is the absolute lowest standard you could have for yourself, not the highest, because it's impossible to attain. So don't worry, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. Rule number 6. This is where I think a lot of us fall. If you find yourself convincing someone, stop it, right? And we've been there. Usually because you know how Plexus can help somebody so bad, or you know they'd be so good at the business, and you find yourself really trying to convince them or really wanting to push them off that fence. So if you're going into convincing mode, it's going to be unproductive and it's going to be a turnoff, she said. Okay? So she said, stop it. She said, if you ever think in your head, boy, I really need to convince so-and-so to do this with me, you need to stop it. You don't want to convince anyone of anything. Because really, if you drag someone to a decision, they're not going to be invested in it anyway. We want them to join because they want to, okay? It's like I say, tell all you guys with Jen, she's on the call. Man, I wanted her on the team so bad. I knew she'd be good. And I kept following up pretty badly, and she just ignored me forever. And then I snapped out of it and was like, okay, I need to back off a little bit, right? And then she finally joined. So it's easy to get in that convincing mode, but if you recognize it, stop it. Rule number 7, listen, really listen. This is something I think in the beginning, new ambassadors, we could teach them better on, because it also helps prevent puking plexus. because even though it's important to talk to people, it's just as important to listen to people. Just listen. Like, what do you want Plexus to help you with? What would an extra $100 a month do for your family? And just listen and let them talk, right? Rule number 8, work from appointment to appointment. Now, she works because she does a lot of stuff over the phone. She does all of her 3 ways on the phone. She has appointments. But you could also think of this as scheduling your Plexus work into your calendar, right? Or scheduling your follow-up. She says, if you feel like you're chasing your potentials, it's because you're not setting up the appointment, the next appointment, when you leave off that last communication. And guys, this is what all the books say. This is what this book says. This is what GoPro says. It's what Rock Your Network Marketing says. They all say you never end a chat with a potential without already setting up the next communication. Even if it's something as, hey, I know you want to think about it. If I don't hear from you by tomorrow, I'm gonna follow up with you again, right? Even if it's something that simple, or if it's something as structured as, I'm gonna call you at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Is that good for you? Okay. So she says, a lot of people don't do this because they're afraid of being pushy. I love what she says with this rule, though. She said, being professional is never pushy. I love that. That's a really great way to think about it. So if you ever have people come to you on your team and you're like, I don't want to follow up because I don't want to be pushy, tell them they're thinking about it wrong. They're being professional. Your time is valuable, and so is your potentials. Instead of not knowing when you're going to follow up with them next, how much better is it if you set another time in a couple of days, right? She says 48 hours. So I really like that. She said it'll also make it a much more efficient and enjoyable process for you, so you don't feel like you're all over the place. So that was a good rule to think about. Rule number 9, don't count your chickens. And this, all she means by this is, until somebody actually joins your team, don't put them on your board that they've joined your team, right? Don't count them for anything till they've actually signed. Because she said if you actually do that, it'll slow down your recruiting. If you start thinking, hey, that person said they're going to sign up, and you kind of check them off in your mind, it'll slow down your recruiting. Rule number 10, lead with the business, default to the products. You guys have heard us say this a lot. And, sometimes it's hard. It's been hard for me to do it because obviously you hear someone talking about migraines, you want to share with them how Plexus can help them with migraines, right? But I think in general, I get what she's saying. In general, when you're going through your list, you want to lead with the business, because then if they say no, you fall back on the products. If they say no to their products, you can't fall back on the business, right? They're not going to jump into business when they've already said no to what the business is about. So she says, lead with the business, default to the products. Number 11, don't leave rambling voicemails. She said, as you start reaching out to people, you are going to get voicemails. You're not going to get people to pick up the phone, even if you've said, hey, I'm going to call you. That was Sarah Taylor, remember? Gave her my number. I ignored her for 9 days. Don't leave rambling voicemails. All you want to say is, hey, sorry I missed you. Love to pick your brain. I'm available to chat tonight at this time. Give me a call. If I don't hear from you, then I will call you tomorrow, right? So she said, keep it short and sweet. And then rule number 12, this is a big one. And this is one you guys may want to take notes on. Go to your book in page 77. She gives a couple of examples. When you're talking to people, she says you always want to lead with what's in it for them. She says when she first started doing this, she would launch into the products and how they can have great skin and how the company is amazing and all the awards the company has gotten. She said, but she learned that's not the way to connect emotionally with people. Remember, we talked about her story, how you want to connect emotionally. So she said she honed her recruiting skills and she started connecting the dots between what she could offer them and what she could do for them. So she started leading her conversations with this, what's in it for them. And what she does, and this is what I want you guys to do for the next, what I write down, for the next 5 people on your list that you're going to follow up with. Where's my notes here? Yeah. So for your next 5 follow-ups tomorrow, she talks about if you can figure out a person's pain points, okay, then you can figure out how Plexus can reduce their pain. And I'm not talking physical pain. I mean, it might be, some of it might be. But she says you just make a chart. It takes 2 minutes of prep time before you follow up with someone. And she gives some examples, right? So let's say this person that she's talking to, she knows their pain is, she's a stay-at-home mom. This person's pain points are she misses making her own money, she misses time with grown-ups, and she misses having an identity outside of being a wife and a mom. So you write that down on the pain side of the piece of paper. On the no pain, you talk about, well, Plexus can bring her an income. Plexus is definitely a social business where she can make new friends. And she actually can be a mom and be a businesswoman with Plexus. So see what she's doing. She's taking the pain and the no pain. And then that's how she starts talking to that person when she follows up with them. And I'm not going to go over all the examples. You guys have the book, but on page 80, 81, 82, 83, she gives you guys examples of how you could reach out to somebody and what you could say, okay? A couple, like one girl she followed up with, her pain points were she had very expensive taste. So this girl really liked her name brand things, but she had kids going to college and needed to save money. So when, on the flip side of the chart, what Plexus could do to reduce that pain, more income to buy her things, plus Plexus gives, right, fun name brand prizes, and she can use her paycheck to fill up those college funds. So it's interesting. I think, you know, if you do that, I think it might give you just a little bit of different way of thinking, and it changes the focus from you onto your potential, right? And takes the focus away from how am I going to get that person to join my team? How am I going to get them to see how great Plexus is? And then instead focuses on how you can help them overcome something you know that they're struggling with, okay? So that was rule number 12. Rule number 13, if it's a no to the business and you've fallen back to the products and it's still a no, ask for referrals. We actually talked about this on the call I did last night about expanding your network. It's totally okay to say, hey, that's great. It may not be for you, but do you know anyone who it might be for? And one tip she gives, though, is you want to be specific in who you're looking for when you ask people for a referral. So for instance, if a teacher tells you no, you then want to tell them you're looking for teachers because you want them to see how teachers are great at this business. And she gives an example. If I'm talking to a teacher, I might say, wow, I really love working with teachers because they're so good at being coachable and teaching others that this is a simple business. Teachers love making more money because you guys know you're underpaid, and they love having the option to spend more time with their kids instead of other people's kids. So do you happen to know any of your fellow teachers that this might be a good fit for that you could refer me to? So you see what she did there? She asked for a referral, but at the same time, she kind of told that teacher that told her no why she still thinks she'd be great at it. So I think that was really, really great. I think a lot of times we forget about referrals. And I think it's because, sorry, I thought my dog was choking there for a second. I think it's because we are too attached to the no. And when someone tells us no, we get bummed. And so we don't even think of a referral. So I would challenge all of us this week, for every no we get this week, we should ask them for a referral. Now, that doesn't mean that you take them off your list because they told you no, right? Just like Michelle, she had someone earlier this week. She approached them about the business. I think it's someone who's already an ambassador, right? And the person said, no, I'm not interested. And Michelle said, great. Do you know anyone who could use Plexus and you can refer them to me? And the person said, yeah. But then the person said, wait, does that mean you make money and I don't? And Michelle said, yes, that's exactly what that means, right? So still keep that no on your list, but don't be afraid to ask for referrals. And then, of course, she says, you never end the conversation when you're looking for people for the business without talking about becoming your customer. So even though we want ambassadors and you're talking about the business, right, don't forget the thing you can fall back on is someone can be a customer. And I think we do that a lot, right? A lot of people, of course, we want them as an ambassador, but you know what? If they want to be a customer and they can only afford X Factor right now, that's fine, right? Because we know X Factor is going to make them feel good. And so I think we do that. And then she says, all you do is you repeat that over and over and over. You follow those rules and you share your story over and over and over. And the more times you do it, the more you're going to be able to build your team and the more people you're going to be able to share something that can help them. Okay? All right. Chapter 6. What time is it? 8:47. All right. I think chapter 6 is pretty quick. And I love this chapter because it's about three-way calls and three-way chats. And you guys have probably heard me say this till I am blue in the face. But guess what? Somebody else is saying it now too. And I love it. So she starts chapter 6 out with, but now what? Okay, so you've talked to everybody. You've gone back and forth, the conversation. Now what do you do? And you know what she said in the beginning that I just love? And I bet some of you guys did too. She says she doesn't like to use the word close. And I'll be honest with you guys. I don't like that word either. If you notice, anytime I do something about closing, I rarely put it on the team page because it just kind of makes me feel very salesy, right? She says she likes to think about it as the decision-making process. And I like it. I really like that. So instead of, how to close or helping with a close, you're just guiding your person through the decision-making process. And your role is to help them determine if your business or your products are right for them so they can make their own decision. I really like that different spin on it because I've never really liked, how to close. But I like that decision-making process. However, what you have to keep in mind is everything you want to do should be motivated by helping them come to the right decision, which we know is triplexus, right? So you still want to use all that positive language, even though it's still a decision-making process, right? Because you're not going to be attached to the outcome, right? Doesn't matter if they say yes or no. And so if you detach yourself from the outcome, she says you're going to be a lot more enthusiastic. You're not going to come across as desperate or salesy if you detach from the outcome. Because remember, you're just sharing something you have and you're just looking for people who are interested in it. And I really love that. I think that's a great way to think about it. And I can remember early on when people would ask me, how do you get so many people to join you? And I'm like, well, I really am kind of I don't think cocky is the right word, but that's the only word I can think of. Kind of cocky about it. I'm kind of like, hey, this is awesome. We're having fun over here. We're feeling great. If you do or you don't, that's up to you. It's no skin off my back. It's no sweat off my back if you don't do it. You're going to be the one missing out, right? Like, we're not the crazy people. They're the crazy people from not joining us. So I think I really like that if you just detach from the outcome. But, and she says too, you still though, even though it's a decision-making process, you want to move them through it quickly. Which is all these fence centers that drive us crazy, right? We want people to make a decision quickly. In the first couple of days would be awesome, right? That'd be great. But she says, try to put a time limit on it. And always, if you're at the close and you can invite them to an event, she said, that's great. She said, but again, even when they're ready, you still don't want to overwhelm them with too much information. And if there's an event in the next 24 to 48 hours, invite them to that. So our Thursday happy hour is a really, really good event. I love it. However, it's on Thursday. If you're talking to somebody on Sunday, you want to try to lead them through the decision-making process of joining your team before Thursday. Then ideally, they could still be in it and maybe they could use the Thursday to get to silver or something, right? Just because the event's there, if it's too far away, don't rely on it. Still try to get them to that decision quicker. Because then they could even take advantage of it. She also talks about the phone call. The phone call, you hear us say three-way chats a lot, okay? So whether it's a phone call or a chat, when you hear us talk about three-way, we do two different ones, okay? Tonight, we're talking about three-way chats with potentials, okay, to get them to join your team. Other three-way chats we talk about are once somebody joins, then we would get them on a three-way call to introduce them to the products, right? Tonight, we're only talking about three-way calls for potentials or three-way chats. And she says in here, if you're afraid of them, get over it. Okay? She said, if you're freaked out, get over it. It's one of the most important closing tools we have in our toolkit. And I love that because you guys have heard me say, three-way chats got me to gold. They got me to gold. It got me a little past gold. I was clueless when I started. I didn't know what I was doing. All I had to do was reach out to people and engage them. And then once I put them in that three-way chat with Sarah Taylor, she did all the work. She led them through that decision-making process. Not everybody joined or ordered when they were in that three-way chat, but it got me to gold because I knew when I started, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know anybody who was doing Plexus except her. She was a stranger. I didn't have any friends who were doing it when I very first started, right? And all I knew was she was a Ruby. She showed me her paycheck, so she must know a little bit about what she's doing to make that check. So she told me to do three-way chats, and I did. And that's what she talks about in this book. And so this is something that we can help our new ambassadors understand too. And she talks about, kind of how to do it. And we're going to go over that. So the first thing, and you've heard me say it, don't ask them to be in a three-way chat. Tell them, okay? This is what we always say. You never ask for permission because, of course, they're going to say no. Sarah Taylor had said, hey, can I put you in a three-way chat? I just said no, right? I was like the biggest skeptic butthead potential ever. So let me give you my three-way call example. Somebody asked me the other day, Amy, how do you engage in a three-way chat? So I'll tell you what I do, and then I'll tell you what she said in the book here. We've got 5 minutes, and then we'll keep it short. I like to, what you want to do, you want to engage your potential, right? You just one-on-one. However you reach out to them, engage them, they're interested. You ask them their health issues, their health goals, their medications. You get to the point where you are recommending a product. Let's say you're talking to somebody, you're like, yeah, I think Triplex would be great for you. Or maybe you don't even recommend a product yet because you're not sure, but you at least say, oh my goodness, Plexus is going to be so good for your migraines. Then all you got to do is say, but you know what? I am not sure which product would be best for you. I think it might be the Triplex, but my friend Amy knows so much more about it. I'm going to make sure I make the right recommendation. I'm adding her to this chat. Then you add your upline to the message with that person. You give your upline, though, a heads up. And she talks about that in here. Got to give your upline a heads up with a little bit of background of your potential so they know what they're walking into, right? So a lot of times if you guys will throw me in a three-way chat, you'll notice you and I are messaging saying like, okay, tell me this person's story. What's her health issue? Is she on the fence? Is she ready to sign? Like, where's she at in the process? Okay. And then you kind of step back and you can do the introductions, and then you kind of step back and let your upline lead the conversation. Now, if your upline has done three-way chats, they will know when to engage you or ask you questions. But this really is helpful in the beginning for new ambassadors too. It's how I learned how to talk to people. It's how I learned how to answer questions. It's how I learned to use positive language and to close the deal or make people come to that decision, right? So she says in here, you should believe in the three-way. You should crave the three-way. You should master the three-way. But she said you never want to call them a three-way. You always want to say, just I'm adding my, my friend to this chat, or we're going to do a phone call. She said that's all you say. She said why you should believe in them and why you should do them. They provide that third-party legitimization. They allow your upline to train you on to handle objections and bring someone to a close. And they move your potential efficiently through that decision-making process. Even if you can bring them quickly to a decision, so maybe you don't need a three-way, chances are the majority of your team can't. So she said even if you have, you've got a knack for it and you're great and you don't need it, she said keep in mind that people on your team might. So you should always do three-ways. And then all she does, guys, in the last 2 chapters, 94 or last couple pages, she just gives you an outline of how it should flow. And it's really for a phone call, which we all know those are better. But I think we can be just as effective in chats especially right for the products and things. But she does talk about, we're going to get off here real quickly. I want to keep it to an hour. 3 reasons why they go bad. Okay, so if you've tried a 3-way and it didn't go over so well for whatever reason, maybe your upline's not done them before, or maybe your upline is inactive or whatever, it's okay to try it again. It's okay to give feedback, okay? It's okay to go to your next upline. I'm not saying skip your upline, but say, hey, look, we need some help with this, right? I don't think we did it right. We are all always open to helping people. But 3 reasons why they go bad. It goes too long. And this is especially when you're on the phone. And this can be for new ambassadors too, guys. You have to keep these to like 15-minute phone calls, 20 minutes max. If you get a new ambassador and you're on the phone for 45 minutes or an hour, that's bad. You do not want to do that. So you don't want to overwhelm them. You still want to keep it simple. You still don't want to puke plexus, right? Then the other 2 reasons they fail is that you either don't kind of introduce them correctly. You just kind of throw it in a chat and leave it there. And there's no like, hey, this is my friend Amy, right? Because she said the introductions are the key to kind of setting the vibe to the call or the chat to keep it casual and relaxed, right? Or you and your upline don't do some fact finding in the beginning. So if your upline comes into that 3-way chat blind, and maybe you've already asked this person all these questions, but you don't tell your upline, and then I come into the 3-way chat and I ask all those questions again, that's going to make the person be like, oh my gosh, you just asked me all these. Why am I having to answer these again, right? So you definitely want to be working closely with whoever you put in that 3-way chat. And it doesn't always have to be your upline. I mean, usually we say your upline because chances are that person has more experience than you, but not always, right? Your upline could be just as new as you. I've been in 3-way chats with tons of people who are even sidelines because of either my thyroid story, my business story. So you can use other people for those 3-way chats to help close. You just want to make sure the person you're reaching out to for that is a good closer, right? They may have a great migraine story, but they may not be any good at talking to people, right? So you just want to keep that in mind, okay? So she ends chapter 6, and I'm going to read it because I love it. You've got a gift to share, and you're looking for people who want what you have to offer. And when you find those people, that's when it's fun, that's when it's a blast, and that's when you keep doing this every single day. So I think if we keep that as our mindset, right, we have a gift to share, I think that's going to help so many people with their mindset when it comes to talking about plexus. You won't worry about puking it. You won't worry about convincing people. You won't worry about bugging people or being a pain. You just are sharing a gift. So thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Next week, we're going to do chapters 7, 8, and 9. I haven't looked to see. They're not that long at all. Quick little chapters. Hopefully everyone will have their book by then. But thanks for hanging out with me tonight, guys.